They called me senile, so I donated the house and watched them lose everything. They whispered that I was losing my mind, so I quietly gave the house to someone who truly deserved it. Sometimes I forget where I leave my glasses, but I never forget who I raised. My name is Helen Marston, and I'm 72 years old. I've lived in the same modest 2-story home in Hartford, Connecticut for over 40 years. It's nothing fancy by today's standards. White siding, a squeaky porch swing, a cracked driveway. But every corner of that house holds a piece of my life. My late husband, Thomas, built the pantry shelves with his own hands. My children took their first steps on that kitchen floor. Every birthday, every holiday, every scraped knee, they all happened within those walls. But lately, the people I once rocked to sleep talk about me like I'm furniture. Something old, taking up space. It started subtly. Mom, are you sure you're taking your medication right? My daughter Lynn, a pediatric nurse, would ask in that gentle tone nurses use for patients they don't think will understand. Then came my son, Eric. He started visiting, not to talk, but to quietly check my mail and go through my bills. And then, the whispering. I once overheard Lynn in the hallway talking to Eric on the phone while she thought I was napping. She forgot her neighbor's name again. I don't know, Eric. It's like she's slipping. Honestly, she's not all there anymore. I stood behind the half-open bedroom door, my hand trembling on the knob, not from fear, but from realizing I had become a ghost in my own home. That night, I sat at the kitchen table. The old ceiling light flickered with the wind, and my cup of chamomile tea had gone cold. I hadn't spoken in over an hour, not even to the dog. They thought I was senile. That I didn't hear, that I didn't know. They were wrong. See, when you're older, people assume fragility. They think your silence means confusion, but silence can be a choice, and I chose it. I didn't argue. I didn't shout. I simply listened, observed, planned. When Lynn offered to help manage the house, she said it kindly, but it sounded more like a done deal than a question. You know, just to help you, Mom. You don't need to worry about repairs or taxes and all that confusing stuff. I smiled. That's thoughtful, honey. Eric followed soon after. Maybe we should hire a part-time caregiver, he said. We can even use the spare bedroom. Eventually, you might want to move into a nice retirement place. It's safer. It wasn't concern. It was calculation, but they didn't know I already had plans. Not for a caregiver, not for a retirement home, but for the future of the house and the person who would receive it when I was gone. I wasn't ready to die, and I wasn't about to be moved out like an old chair. That night, I pulled a thick folder labeled Private, Helen's stuff from my closet. Inside were documents, my living trust, property deed, power of attorney, and most importantly, a list of people who had shown me kindness without expecting anything in return. At the top was Mariah, a young woman I met 3 winters ago outside the grocery store. She'd just moved to Hartford with her daughter after escaping a bad situation. She used to shovel my snow without asking. She baked me bread when my knees went out. She never asked for money, only said, "We look out for each other here, don't we?" "Yes, we do," I told her, and I was about to prove. And my kids noticed when I forgot my doctor's name or mixed up salt and sugar, but they never noticed. When I started closing accounts or changing the locks without giving them the new keys, they saw a trembling hand, but not the sharpness in my eyes. By the time they'd started planning my next chapter, I had already written my own ending. There was no anger, just a deep sadness, the kind that settles quietly and stays. Lynn, with her clipboard mind, had once curled up beside me during storms. Eric used to draw stick figure families, always with Mommy wearing a red heart. Where had those children gone? Now they visited out of obligation, not love. Lynn scrolled on her phone. Eric checked the thermostat, but Mariah, she showed up differently. No agenda. No expectations. Just care. Her daughter Annie drew me too. In her pictures, I was still Grandma Helen. When Eric noticed Annie's drawing on my fridge, he frowned. "What's this?" "A gift," I said. "From someone who still sees me." He didn't reply. Just went upstairs to check for leaks, as if that's all I was now. Something to maintain. That night, I called my lawyer, Frank Dorsey, the same man who'd helped Thomas and me with our will. When I told him my plan, to legally transfer the house to Mariah and Annie, he didn't laugh. He didn't question my state of mind. He simply said, "Helen, that's the clearest I've ever heard you." Weeks later, the papers were signed, sealed, and filed. Lynn kept pushing her brochures for senior communities. "Mom, they have yoga, shuttle service, even a salon. You'd love it." "I'm happy here," I said softly. "But Mom, you barely leave the house." "I have everything I need." She didn't hear me. Or maybe she didn't want to. They had already erased me in their minds, turned me into a task, but I wasn't going to be their burden. I baked, I gave away jam, I smiled. I lived quietly until the day freedom came in an envelope stamped approved. When they visited that Saturday, unannounced as always, they came armed with plans. Lynn started, "Mom, we think it's time to move forward with your care plan." "You're right," I said calmly. "It is time to move forward." Her eyes lit with relief until I added, "I already did. I no longer own this house." Silence. "What do you mean?" Eric asked. "I signed it over," I said evenly, "to someone who's shown me more kindness in 3 years than either of you in 10. Lynn's face went pale. "You gave it to that girl down the street?" "You barely know her." "I know enough," I said. "She helped me without wanting anything." Eric clenched his jaw. "You've been manipulated." "No," I whispered. "I've been loved." They stood frozen. No charts, no brochures, no plan. And I, for the first time in years, felt strong. They left in silence. No hugs, no apologies. Just the sound of the car door closing. I sat in my chair, the sunlight warm on my face. Not lonely. Not bitter, just free. 3 days passed after Lynn and Eric stormed out of my home, and I didn't hear a word from either of them. No texts, no calls. Not even one of Lynn's passive-aggressive emails, the kind where she says something sharp but wraps it in concern. But I wasn't waiting anymore. I'd waited for their approval for too long. I was done chasing it. Now it was time to move forward with the only thing I still had to give, a legacy of love, not resentment. That morning, I called Mariah. "Could you stop by this afternoon?" I asked. "Of course," she said immediately. "Is everything all right?" That's what I loved about her. She always asked that question honestly, not as polite noise, but because she genuinely cared. She didn't know what was coming. That made it even better. She arrived around 3 with Annie walking beside her, clutching a little purple sketchbook. They both had paint on their hands. "We were finishing a project," Mariah said with a sheepish grin. "Annie insisted on painting birds today." "Come in," I told them. I made tea. We sat at the same round kitchen table where I'd once cut birthday cakes and signed permission slips. For a moment, it felt like the old kind of afternoon, the kind that warms your bones. Mariah sipped her tea, studying me. "You seem different today," she said. "Lighter." "I am," I told her. Then I opened the drawer beside me, pulled out a small envelope, and slid it across the table. Inside was the deed to the house, and a single silver key. Her brow furrowed as she opened it. I watched her face shift from confusion to disbelief, and then to something I will never forget. Stunned, breathless gratitude. "What is this?" She whispered. "It's yours," I said. "This house. It's yours now, Mariah. Yours and Annie's." Her hand started to shake. "Helen, no. I can't. I don't deserve this." "Yes, you do," I said firmly. "You didn't ask for it. That's exactly why you deserve it." I looked her in the eye. "You treated me like a person when my own children treated me like I was already boxed up and labeled. You shoveled my snow. You brought me soup. You fixed the hinge on the back gate and never said a word about it." Tears slipped down her face. "But this is too much." "It's not," I said softly. "It's not nearly enough for what you've given me." You reminded me I still mattered, that I wasn't just fading out of the picture. Annie crawled into her mother's lap and reached for the key, wrapping her tiny fingers around it like it was something magical. "And maybe it was." Mariah shook her head. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything," I told her. "Just live here. Love this place. Fill it with laughter. Fix that back fence. Let Annie run in the yard." Then she stood, came around the table, and hugged me so tightly I thought my ribs might crack. And I welcomed the ache because it was real. It was honest. It was earned. Later that evening, After they left to start the process of moving in, I sat alone on the porch swing and looked out at the street that had witnessed every version of me. I thought about the young woman who first walked through that door in her 20s, carrying her first baby. I thought about the wife who held her husband's hand one last time in that living room. I thought about the mother who packed lunches, signed permission slips, worried about spelling tests and scraped knees, and I thought about the old woman they whispered about. The senile ghost in her own house. She was gone. In her place was me, fully present, fully proud. This was never about revenge. This was about reclaiming my life. I didn't burn the house down. I passed it forward. 2 weeks later, there was a knock. I was sitting by the window with a book I'd read a dozen times, To Kill a Mockingbird, one of Thomas's favorites. The wind moved the curtains and I could hear birds outside. The whole moment felt peaceful. Then a car door slammed. Then came the knock. Sharp, fast, angry. I didn't even need to look. It was Lynn and Eric. Mariah and Annie had already started moving some things into the house a few days earlier. They were downstairs sorting boxes and painting one of the spare bedrooms when I opened the front door. Eric didn't say hello. Lynn didn't smile. You had no right, Eric snapped. No right to just give it away. I stood quietly and let them get through the first burst of outrage. This house was supposed to stay in the family, Lynn said, her voice tight and shaking. We were going to make sure it was kept safe. That you were kept safe? Safe? I raised an eyebrow. Is that what you call going through my drawers? Making plans to move me without telling me? Talking about me like I wasn't even in the room? They shifted, uncomfortable, but they didn't deny it. I heard you, I said. Every word. I heard you call me senile. I heard you talk about how I was getting confused. All because I didn't want to be managed like a houseplant. We were trying to help, Eric shot back. No, I said flatly. You were trying to control me. Lynn folded her arms. And now you've just handed over our inheritance to a stranger. I took a slow breath, stepped outside, and let the screen door close softly behind me. She's not a stranger, I said. She's a friend. A better one than either of you have been in years. And this isn't your inheritance. It never was. It was mine. Eric let out a bitter laugh. You're not thinking clearly. I'm thinking clearer than I have in a long time, I told him. You mistook my silence for weakness. I was quiet because I needed to be sure. I needed to see who you really were. Lynn's eyes were glossy, but there was no apology in them, only anger. So that's it? She said. You're just cutting us out? I'm not cutting anyone out, I said. You did that yourselves. The day you stopped seeing me as a person. The day you treated my age like proof that I didn't count anymore. You lost this house the moment you stopped loving me without conditions. They were silent then, not because they felt guilty, but because for the first time there was nothing left for them to collect. Eric turned and walked toward the car. Lynn stayed a moment longer. Mom, she said, and for 1 second her voice cracked, almost like it used to. You raised us. I did, I nodded. And I will always love the children you used to be, but I can't spend the rest of my life waiting for them to come back. Then I turned and went back inside. I didn't cry. Not even when I heard the car pull away. You don't cry over people who only show up when there's something to gain. You mourn them, you let them go, and then you bless yourself with the life they tried to keep you from having. That night, Mariah brought dinner, chicken pot pie and green beans. Annie sat beside me and asked if we could plant flowers out front next week. I smiled. Not because I had won, but because I had finally let go of something that had been sitting heavy on my chest for years. A week later, the front yard smelled like fresh soil and new beginnings. Annie had picked the marigolds herself, bright orange like tiny suns. Mariah brought petunias and daisies. I added lavender from the little pot I'd been keeping on the windowsill since last spring. We worked together in the warm Connecticut sun, kneeling side by side in the dirt, our hands messy and our hearts clear. And as I watched Annie pat down the soil with her small hands, I realized something I hadn't admitted even to myself. Wasn't sad anymore. Not about Eric. Not about Lynn. Not even about all those years I spent trying to earn their love back. Because love is not something you're supposed to beg for. Not from your own children. Not from anyone. Love should be given freely, like water, like sunlight through a window. And Mariah and Annie, they gave it freely. Mariah had already insisted on paying the property taxes going forward. She'd started talking about repairs she wanted to make, not out of obligation, but out of respect. She told me, "This will always be your home, Helen. We're just honored to live in it." I didn't need my name on the papers anymore. I had already woven myself into the walls, the stairs, the uneven floorboards. Sometimes at night, I'd walk barefoot through the house and touch the places where life had happened. The corner where Thomas danced with me after his promotion. The closet where Lynn hid during hide and seek. The hallway where Eric once scribbled on the wall with a crayon, and I laughed instead of scolding him. I didn't cling to those memories like relics anymore. I honored them, and I added new ones. Annie's laughter echoing off the porch, Mariah singing off-key in the kitchen, the warm smell of fresh bread, basil, nail polish. I was still alive. Still wanted. Still me. One evening, Mariah and I sat under the porch light, sipping iced tea while the crickets started their night music. "I don't know if I've said this the right way," she told me quietly, "but thank you for trusting us." I looked at her. This woman who had walked through storms and still smiled like morning sun. "You didn't have to say it," I said. "You lived it," she nodded. "Do you think they'll ever come around?" I thought of Lynn's tight jaw, Eric's clenched fists, the disappointment they wore like perfume. "Maybe," I said, "but they'll have to find their way back on their own. This time, I won't be the one waiting at the window." I didn't say it with anger. I said it with peace. Because sometimes the most loving thing you can do is let someone walk away. And sometimes the greatest revenge is not revenge at all. It's joy. It's choosing to keep blooming, keep laughing, keep living, no matter what someone tried to take from you. I never planned on writing them a letter. But one morning before the sun came up, I woke with this feeling, like there was something unfinished inside me, asking to be spoken. So I sat down at the same kitchen table where I once bandaged scraped knees, wrote grocery lists and whispered over unpaid bills. And I wrote. Not to shame them, not to beg, just to leave them with the truth they refused to see. "Dear Lynn and Eric, I know you're angry. I know you believe I made a mistake, that I let feelings cloud my judgment, that I gave away your inheritance in a moment of confusion. But listen to me carefully. My mind has never been clearer. I didn't give this house away because I was pressured. I didn't do it to hurt you. I did it because I remembered who I am, and I remembered who you became. When I needed conversation, you offered control. When I needed dignity, you offered supervision. When I needed to feel human, you treated me like paperwork. You forgot that I sat by your beds when you were sick, that I taught you to tie your shoes, that I packed your lunches and stayed up past midnight sewing costumes for school plays. I never asked for thanks. I did it because I loved you. But love, my children, is not the same thing as loyalty. I heard your whispers. She's slipping. She's not all there. It's time to take over. So I did what I've always done. I acted with grace, quietly, intentionally, without a scene. I gave this house to someone who reminded me that love isn't something you earn by guilt. It's something you give by being present. Mariah never asked me for anything. She brought time, kindness, respect. She helped not because she hoped to gain, but because it was right. You came with plans, she came with soup, you came with brochures, she came with warmth, so I made my choice. You may tell people I lost my mind, that I was misled. Let them believe it if it helps. But if you're honest with yourselves, and I hope one day you will be, you'll know this. I did not act out of weakness. I acted out of strength. I don't need you to agree with me. I only hope that one day you remember the version of me who loved you without limits, and maybe, just maybe, you'll learn to love that way too. Mom. I folded the letter and placed it in a box along with family photos, my wedding ring, and an old music box that still plays the lullaby I used to hum when they were babies. I left it with my lawyer, with instructions to deliver it if they ever tried to fight the deed, and then I let go, because there is something deeply freeing about choosing your own ending. About standing in the autumn of your life and saying, "This is who I am. This is what I gave. And this is what I will not apologize for." The next morning, Annie ran into the kitchen holding a wrinkled drawing. It was the house, the porch, the little garden, and 3 stick figures. One tall, one medium, one small, all holding hands. Look, Grandma Helen, she said proudly. It's us. I held the paper and felt something quiet and whole settle in my chest. That's perfect, I whispered. It's exactly right. And it was, because in the end, they called me Senile. But I was never confused. I knew exactly what I was doing, and I did it in love.